Hey everyone, it's Jane and welcome. Today we're talking about Star Trek Discovery Season 4, Episode 6, Stormy Weather. Before we get into it, if you don't mind hitting that subscribe button, I really want to keep making these videos and really build out this channel. It really just helps out, honestly. I'm trying to do something. Yeah, if you want to see more videos on focus on Star Trek, on other series, for example, like Picard, or, eventually, hopefully I can do a Lower Decks episode or Strange New Worlds whenever that comes out, or even just focusing on The Expanse or the Orville, just hit the subscribe button. I'm going to get to it. Honestly, past this point, we're talking spoilers. If you haven't seen this episode, just pause it, come on back. Otherwise, let's go. Here's the thing. I'm just gonna go straight into it. I was having trouble coming up with a script for this episode, because you have to literally watch this episode. It is one of those episodes where, like, okay, if there's one episode that you are like, oh my god, you need to watch in this season, it is this one. Mainly because it was honestly very scary. It had me. It had me. The one thing I would say, like, it was crazy was I really didn't understand, like, how to really even take notes for this episode, because a lot of what has been happening this season, especially within the format change, has been focusing on, like, the DMA, more of like a behind the scenes C plot situation. And technically speaking, the DMA is still technically really a C plot situation, but this is the most that it's been up front than compared to all the other episodes. And it was crazy. This episode was crazy. Can we give a shout out to Jonathan Frakes? I guess this is my top moment because he directed the hell out of this episode. If there's one thing you're gonna have a good episode, with Jonathan Frakes involved, he will deliver. He will give you what you are looking for, and from whoever you're getting it from, because that man is a director, a crazy good director, and just love to see it. Our next top moment kind of just focuses, I guess, on Gray as a character. I kind of take back some of the things I said in the last episode, mainly because I was really under the impression where Gray's story, yeah, he said he wanted to be a guardian before, but I really was like, what is your purpose on this ship, though? Like, truly, what is your goal? What are you doing on this ship besides basically being the partner to Adira? Adira being basically a child. No offense, but a child on the ship. I was really confused. And it seems as though that the direction that they're taking Gray is being, hopefully, I guess, in a similar role to what Colbert plays for every single other person on the ship. Basically, Gray being the emotional anchor for Zora. And the truth is, like, they do have a very similar experience of basically corporealizing in, like, their own body, with Zora's body being the ship, but also, like, Gray's body being, well, Gray's body. So it's a very interesting conversation, very thing. I will say, I think as a whole, this show has entirely too many characters, and it doesn't have enough to really hone in and work on some of, like, the senior deck staff, right? Which is why we have a lot of these weird moments where it's like, well, yeah, when I was younger, I did this, and I was climbing. On one hand, I don't mind getting this stuff because I think it's interesting to get, like, little tidbits in people's lives, build out their wiki pages, because it's not their fault, right? Why essentially in the beginning of the show they chose not to focus on, like, the senior staff or the people that were on the deck, people that were up there, like Detmer or Awasakun. And, like, we've been having, like, these little moments where we're really building them out, but it just kind of, like, it does such a disservice to them because they chose to go the direction that they did originally. And I think this is really just them trying to retcon their own bullshit, if I'm being completely honest. That just seems to be really what it is. And I say this also from a standpoint of, like, the only real person out of the senior staff that is not, like, main cast out here and living about, who I remember their name is Awasakun. 5 years later from now, the only person I'll probably remember is Awasakun. Maybe Reese. But there's literally the blonde girl who is there. I don't know what she does. I call her Emily in my headcanon. I'm just being completely honest. I don't know what she does on the ship. But yeah, I don't know. That's just something I think the show really needs to really work on. Finding more, like, interesting ways to get in the backstory of these characters. A very interesting thing to just talk about, like, was really going back to even whenever Giorgio went to the Mirrorverse, when she was transitioning back to her own time. It was the thing when Reese, I believe, and Owasakun were fighting. I felt like that did so much more character work just organically versus like just randomly having them like freak out and like talk, which we can talk about in a second about like something else. But we'll get to Owasakun in a minute. But going up, I also think the next callback easily, which would be a top moment, is really callback to really Zora herself. Essentially, there's a short track that came out in like 2018, essentially where this man and an AI that was inside of Discovery just lived and all that jazz. And supposedly this is now canon. It's canon. We're going to eventually get to that point. Eventually, in the future, Discovery's going to be left alone for about 1,000 years, and Zora's just going to be out here living her life in that ship by herself. So essentially, this is really a callback, and then Zora had her visual moment of debuting herself, and it just seems like everything was really calling back to the idea of Calypso. So I don't really know how that's really going to pay off, how the show really wants to pay that off, but obviously they've put that inside of the canon of the show and what's going to happen with that ship, essentially, in the future, whatever that really is going to look like. But also, I wouldn't imagine, like, the captain of the ship would just leave Discovery just in the middle of space by itself, just there. Anyway, I would say the other interesting part out of this episode is really just to call back to the pattern buffer. If you don't know, now you do. Essentially, it goes back to this TNG episode, which ironically I watched about a month ago, of when Montgomery Scott, essentially his ship that he was on, essentially was about to explode. So he like hid inside the pattern buffer, or the in-between before like the rematerialization of the people after the transporters. And this one, it just seemed like everybody was like, go in there together. You got this. Which I'm like, on one hand, I'm like, that's some cute shit. Love that. On the other hand, I'm like, y'all just willingly just do into the dang pattern buffer. And what do I say to this? Like, it was so like yes, it's an urgent situation. Like, we're all about to die if we don't do this. But at the same time, it's like, it was just wild to me to watch. And the next thing into this was this idea of like the outside galaxy force. This episode was really just shattering a lot of my perceptions. So I knew about the alpha, beta, gamma, and delta quadrants. I get that. Delta being basically where a lot of Voyager took place, gamma basically being where the DS9 essentially took place, and then alpha being where Earth is, and then beta being where like the Romulans and Vulcans and Klingons are. I get that. I guess in my mind, I had thought that they had crossed outside of the galaxy, but now we're saying like, okay, you're 1,000 years in the future. You're telling me Starfleet has not explored majority of the galaxy as a whole? You're saying they haven't gone outside their galaxy yet? I don't know. It just seemed like something like, I thought we had already done this. I would think you have already done this by now, but broke that perception. Now, no one really knows essentially what the DMA is, whether it was an experiment gone wrong, whether it was really just a first wave attack, whether it was literally just this group of beings just wanted to do something. I don't know. No one really knows. And I guess because now we know it's more of an outside galaxy threat, that kind of makes it a little bit better from a standpoint. Because if there's something I do love, and this is weird, but I do love this, and it kind of is because of DS9, is I love a good outside my area type of war battle situation. I don't know why. I just do. It's weird, but I love it. So, interesting to see exactly where that goes. Because who the hell knows at this point? They've settled in. They're making choices. They're making moves. They're very hard to predict, just like the DMA. So, literally, I can't even think of like where the next path is really going to be. But something I had to. Normally, I don't like get on Twitter or like read anything typically before I write these, because I typically like to have a really fresh like thought process. But this time I had to get on Twitter just to sit there and see what people are saying about this episode, because I was just sitting here like, I am in awe. Like, what do I even say? Like, what is exactly am I going to focus on in this episode that I'm going to talk about to y'all? And a big part of what I saw, which I typically just don't talk about on the show is really this idea of like Owasakun and Detmer basically being, in a relationship. The reason why I don't, here's the thing about Subtext. I'm all about it. Literally a big part of I listened to a whole entire podcast about queer subtext in the X-Men. Literally. And there's a lot of points to reasons why people, especially within comics, would have implemented subtext or subtextual reasons for certain things, especially when it comes to queer relationships. It just makes a lot of sense. Either like the standards and practices, either a corporate mandate, or just, people were not able to sit there and like portray things the way they really wanted to. Okay, cool. That's fine. That doesn't make any sense. This whole idea of subtext between like Owasakun and Detmer does not make any sense on a show where you have active like LGBTQ representation with non-binary, you have trans representation, you have gay relationships. Like, it doesn't make any sense that you would not have that. So this whole idea like they're trying to have a subtext, maybe it's the fact that they can't build out that conversation. They're trying to give us some more subtextual information between like Detmer and Owasakun because, we just don't have the lines to sit there and tell people like, yeah, they're in a relationship. I don't know. But it just seems a little weird to sit there and say subtext. And I could be one of those people being like, you're just missing the point. I probably am. But it's in a show where you have active representation, to take 2 minutes after the show to be like, yeah, they're in a relationship. I could see this being a whole situation where like if the end of Discovery and we're like, yeah, we want to address this. Like, oh my God, they're together. Like, okay, cool. But like Owasakun and Detmer, I don't know. This whole idea of subtext with them, it's just, for me, I'm not trying to say I don't care, but like, because I'm like, if they're in a relationship, cool. If they're not, I don't know. I read it as more of like they're just really good friends, but I could be literally off and it could be a whole situation where they're roommates. They could be, friends of Dorothy, secretly a Dazzler fan, a fan of Dazzler. Like, who knows? At this point, I just think it's really funny how like the idea of subtext when you have active people who are queer. So anyway, that's kind of really my whole entire thought at this point. I don't really know where this show goes at this point. I truly don't. I really did enjoy seeing the Archer space dock today. That was cool. That was really cool. The idea of using sonar to escape basically darkness that is basically eating you up. Very interesting. But I cannot sit there and emphasize, like, this episode really kind of scared the shit out of me. This episode had me on the seat, had me in the books. Yeah, it was good. So I'm gonna let y'all go. I will talk to y'all later. I'll be back for like the mid-season finale, and then we can get caught up there. Anyway, if you have any comments, questions, concerns, let me know how you really felt with this episode, because this episode was a lot. And also, fun fact, no Commander Reno. But anyway, I said my thing. I'll talk to y'all later. Bye.